Tonight, we kick off WTF month at DC Comics, and just to give you a sampling of what that means, Batwing quits, Animal Man gets fired, and Stormwatch resets the entirety of the universe again. I'm not kidding, and I'm not okay. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 83 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and alright. So I talked about this briefly at the end of last episode, but I need to bring it up here because as of last episode I didn't read this week's comics and now I did. And I need to talk to someone about this. So this month as a whole, DC did a gimmick with at least its covers, but also more so the stories. And they called it WTF. Which means exactly what you think it means. But what they did was said, all of our books are going to have some major twist in them. Some huge shakeup that you're never going to see coming. And to be fair, they delivered. They delivered on many of these books. That being said, I don't even know how to begin to explain some of these books and how they shook them up. The ones that are getting me, as I don't want to spoil too much before we get to it, but Batwing and Stormwatch. If you haven't been listening, you need to listen to those because the way that they shake them up is absolutely ludicrous. But while I'm telling you about the books, why don't I just tell you about the books? So this week we have the number 19 issues of Batwing, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. We have the number 11 issues of Earth 2, World's Finest, and Dial H. And we have the number 7 issue of Phantom Stranger. And almost all of them are doing this WTF thing. And I don't dislike it a lot of the time, but it's very hard for me to say, and then the story just did this, and it just went off the rails. Because I've been following these stories, and the fact that they do go off the rails so quickly kind of concerns me. I think this might be the turning point in the New 52, if I'm being honest. Because some of the things they do are not great. And I've been pretty positive on a lot of books so far in the New 52. This feels like it might be the shift. The moment where everyone's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. Are we sure we like this? And I'm just concerned about that. So please, lend me your ear as we start talking about our first book of the WTF month, Green Lantern. Green Lantern number 19, written by Geoff Johns, art by Szymon Kudranski and Ardian Syaf. So last issue we left off with Sinestro and Simon escaping the dead world or whatever it's called. And Hal saying, all right, well, what if I kill myself? Will that work? This issue picks up in that same spot with him talking to Tomar Ray saying, hey, can I kill myself? Is that going to work? And he's like, no. Why would you think that would work? It's literally suicide. And he's like, okay, but I'll will myself back into being alive. And he's like, you're dead. That's not how that works, Hal. I don't know why you think that works like that. So then we cut back to Sinestro, who's holding Simon at Green Lantern gunpoint, basically saying, tell me where I can find the first lantern. I'm going to blow his brains out. And as they're calling them, Templar Guardians are around and they're like, hey, here's a basic crash course on who the first lantern is because we know you haven't met him yet. So he was Volthoom and he's very strong and he did bad things with his abilities. And so Sinestro is like, all right, and who are you guys? And it's like, oh, we're the New Guardians. Not that New Guardians, the other New Guardians. And Bidge is like, hey, why are you trying to shoot Simon? What did he ever do to you? And Simon's like, I may have killed him. And he's like, I'll leave you alone for 1 minute. So at that point, Sinestro just teleports out because he doesn't want to deal with any of that. And we cut over to Korugar where Arsona is currently taking down some bad guy or something like that. And Sinestro comes up with a wrecking ball construct and just takes out the bad guy. And it's just like, hey, Arsona, really need to talk to you. Here's the thing. I need Korugar to back me up, because if Korugar's behind me, maybe the Green Lantern Corps will consider listening to me, because right now they really don't want to do that. And Arsona basically is like, you're asking for help. You have never, ever asked for help. You've been too prideful for that. So, all right, I'm willing to give you some leeway here. And he thanks her and says, yeah, we'll save the universe together. But of course, at that point, First Lantern shows up and does his whole, let's look back into your past and see what I can change about it. So he goes back and says, what if you never became a Green Lantern? What if we just went back that far? And we see that he is a police officer of some sort, and he's rallying his people that they're all going to fight against the Anti-Monitor and make it so they're not going to be conquered as a planet. And turns out he has a romance with Arsona. Which, yeah, I think that's pretty clear. First Lantern's like, oh, you like her. You may even love her. And even you love her the same way you did Aaron Sir, who he also, I don't think he changed anything about it, but he goes back to that moment and just reminds him of like, oh, see, you did this horrible, awful thing. And Aaron Sir died because of the Manhunters. And that's when you truly became corrupted or whatever. So at that point, Sinestro's let out of his grasp as he goes over to Arsona. And I'm just like, oh, and she feels very strong feelings about you too. But should I tell you what kind of feelings they are? And then Sinestro takes the opportunity to punch the First Lantern in the face. And all of a sudden that brings down like massive lightning strikes that are basically rupturing Korugar. And he's like, all right, you hurt me. I don't like that. So I'm going to destroy your world. And Sinestro puts all the like people nearby inside of a bubble. And he says that he'll protect them. And he uses his Green Lantern constructs to drill a hole straight through the First Lantern's chest. And First Lantern's like, you hurt me. No one's ever hurt me like that before. That's crazy. You are something special. But I'm not here for you. I'm here for your world. And he's like, well, I just protected my world by stabbing you through the chest. So one up on you, I guess. And he's like, right, but what if you didn't? And then he just rewinds time like 4 seconds, gets so he wasn't stabbed in the chest. And then all of the people he was protecting die. And all of Korugar explodes. So at that point, back in the dead zone, a bunch of dead people arrive, and they're all the Korugarians. And Tomar Ray's like, uh-oh, that's not good. So Hal's like, all right, if Korugar's gone, I don't see Sinestro, but clearly Sinestro has something to do with this. I got to get out of here now. I'm going to jump off this cliff. And so he runs, and he jumps off the cliff, and he dies. Hal Jordan's just dead at the bottom of this cliff. And we see Sinestro curled up in the fetal position, just floating in space. And I really love this panel layout of his narration box has been green this entire time. And over the course of this page, it slowly fades into becoming yellow until finally we see on the final page, Sinestro comes across his old Yellow Lantern power battery. And he says, yep, I'm going to end this one way or another. So yeah, Sinestro's Yellow Lantern again. Next issue, Green Lantern 20, is the end of Geoff Johns' whole saga. It is a massive blowout that I think takes like 3 issues worth of time to tell. So that's going to be a whole thing. But for this particular issue, I liked it. I think it was good. I've never really felt any particular like, oh yeah, Sinestro the hero or even Sinestro the villain that much over the course of this run. It's always felt like Sinestro has just been self-serving. So this is definitely character development in that regard of seeing him, you know, break down and be like, look, I need help. I am not able to do this on my own. So no, I'm at least interested in that. The Hal Jordan stuff, I mean, there's no little last panel thing where it shows like, oh, Hal is now a Black Lantern or something, but I'm sure that's the way they're going to go with it. It just seems like he's dead, though, at the end of this. I don't know. It seems like the final page cliffhanger should have been both of them rather than just Sinestro's thing, but hey, whatever, it worked. Overall, I'll give this issue a I'll give it an 8. It would have been an 8.5 if the first Lantern stuff was more interesting because, the whole reason he was doing it was like, oh, I destroyed your planet. That made you feel such strong emotions that yada yada, I'm even more powerful than I was before. And I feel like over the course of all of these issues, it's just been the first Lantern being like, yada yada, I'm even more powerful than I was before this issue started. And it's like, okay, but you're not doing anything. You're doing the exact same, let's rewind time and mess with stuff to make you freak out a little bit. I want to see him warp reality. I want to see this godlike power that he's bragging about. But so far it's just been, he's able to make people feel bad. Oh no. So if it would have handled that better, it would have gotten a higher rating. But I'll give this particular issue an 8, and I look forward to seeing how the entire Geoff Johns saga is going to wrap up next issue. Detective Comics number 19, written by John Layman, art by Jason Fabok. So, if they didn't restart the numbering of Detective Comics with the New 52, this would have been issue 900 of Detective Comics. And I feel like it's having your cake and eating it too to celebrate that when you did the renumbering. But regardless, they did it, and this comic ends up being an 80-pager. I am not going to cover all 80 pages. I'm going to cover the first story, which is by the creative team before and after this issue. I'll get to the other stuff some other time, but this particular story follows Man-Bat. So over in Batman Incorporated, Man-Bat serum has been a thing. It has not been a thing otherwise, and they're just introducing it here. So we see a whole bunch of Man-Bats flying around, and man standing out at the window saying, I did this to Gotham. And turns out this man is Kirk Langstrom. And his wife comes up saying, honey, you need to get away from the window. It's dangerous. And he's like, but I can do something. I can help them. I can help fix Gotham. This is the only difference I can make, Francine. I just hope it's the right one. And we see him holding a bottle of Man-Bat serum. Cut to not even an hour earlier, there are no Man-Bats. And Batman's talking about a block of Gotham between 9th and 10th Avenues that are called the 900s. Get it? And it turns out that this isn't really a crime area. Like, Batman doesn't have to spend a lot of time here. These are pretty well-off people and very good. And we see this mother has a sick baby, and the store is just closing, but she needs to buy some medicine. Store owner lets her in, and she starts collapsing, saying, oh, whatever's wrong with my son must be wrong with me too. And she sits back up, and both her and the baby have Man-Bat tified. So, cut to now, the city's overrunning with Man-Bats. It's a highly contagious virus that has spread amongst the city block. All the people here have become Man-Bats, and Batman's just trying to take them down without killing them, hoping that he can figure out some sort of cure, because he knows that these are normal people. And so he fights one of them off, tackles it down to the ground, and gets a blood sample, which he sends over to Alfred, who's in the cave, to analyze it. And he's like, yeah, no, we can analyze the blood, we can do that stuff, but it's still going to take time to get a full reversal thing. And he's like, okay, well, we don't have time. And they talk about Victor Zsasz very briefly. He was released at the end of the last issue, or at least he's been around at the end of the last issue, and he's been killing a bunch of people. And Batman's like, I'm going to deal with him. He's a whole different thing. I'm really kind of pressed on this Man-Bat thing at the moment. So what else do we got? And as he's talking to Alfred, he says, like, well, maybe you should call in the family. Maybe have, I don't know, even like Red Hood show up, because this is kind of a big deal. And Batman's like, nah, I got it. You just deal with looking after the toxin thing. So he goes and attacks some more Man-Bats, and we see that he actually did try calling in Batgirl, and she just didn't answer. She was already on the case, though, just didn't want to bother telling Bruce. And Dick apparently was already on his way out of Gotham to go to Chicago, because that's just going to be something that happens in the next issue of Nightwing, and the editor's note really wants you to know that. So at this point, Batman's still dealing with the Man-Bats. He uses a bunch of sonic weaponry to disable them because they can't handle their enhanced hearing. And using cell phone data of all the people who were calling 911 and like mapping it by time, they figured out that the epicenter of all this was a specific apartment in a specific building. So he breaks into that building, and he sees a dead body in there, and there's this knife in the back that he has a owl's head on the dagger, and he's like, that's weird and something I don't really want to deal with right now. But he sees this blue goop stuff on the body, and he's like, oh, this is the same serum that was used to make Man-Bats and Batman Incorporated. I think this is Talia's work. This is all Talia. I gotta deal with this. So then he gets snuck up on from behind. Turns out it's man-batified Zaz. He is after Batman. He's using all the stuff, and he's like, okay, but he's still kind of stupid because he's just man-batified, so I'm just going to wrap him up in a grappling hook and tackle him out the window. And so he does and takes him down. Batwoman shows up for a single panel and doesn't do anything except say, I'm here to help Gotham, not you. Because over in Batwoman, she's doing a thing as well. But then at that point, Francine and Kirk Langstrom show up, and they're like, hi, we're scientists, we're geneticists, and by the way, this is all my fault. And Batman's like, oh, okay, it wasn't my ex. That's good to know. And Kirk says, yeah, well, I didn't, spread it out. I didn't do it. I just made the serum, and it was to, try to help deaf people, because I was using bat DNA to do that. But clearly, it didn't quite work. So anyway, here's the plan. I'm going to undo all this by making a counter virus that will only cause the man-bat looking symptoms if you have a very specific DNA genetic code. And then he stabs himself with it, and he says, it just so happens to be my genetic code. Which I don't understand as to why he couldn't just make it the DNA of someone who's dead. You'd think that would work just as well, but I guess he needs to be a man-bat in order to spread it. So either way, his wife's freaking out like, oh, Kirk, you didn't say you'd do this. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, there's no time. I have to do this to save Gotham. So he becomes a man-bat. He punches Batman in the face without thinking about it and then flies off. And as he's flying over Gotham, the antidote is spread and everybody is saved from being man-bats. Victor Zsasz is put into chains and he's being arrested, sent back to Arkham. And he says, the Birdman gave me the knife and a jar of the blue stuff. And Batman's like, you mean Penguin? Penguin's in jail since last issue. We got him arrested. He's like, no, not the little Birdman. The big Birdman. The Emperor Penguin. And then we see Emperor Penguin, Ogilvy, is full-on groping Poison Ivy saying, hey, I saved your life. You owe me a favor. I'm here to collect. And that's the first story of the 80 pages. Again, I'll get to the other stuff some other time, but this felt more like an ad for just, hey, what's going on in the Bat family? Because clearly everyone's pissed off with Batman because of death of the family. Then we have Batgirl, who's got her own book. Then we've got Nightwing, who's doing his own thing. Then Batwoman shows up for a single panel saying, by the way, I have a book as well. And all of them had editor's notes saying, check out this thing. It just felt like this was an ad more so than an actual story that needed to be told. And the fact that it's all cured now, at the end of the last issue of Detective Comics, the whole thing was that Ogilvy got his hands on the Man-Bat serum. And it's just fixed. It's just done. There's no stakes here anymore. I don't understand what's even going on with the Emperor Penguin storyline, which has been an issue for the entire story because they have constantly had to put it on the back burner for event after event after event. And I feel very bad for the writers, or the writer, John Layman. But yeah, no, it's just not really clicking. There's no cohesive story to what is Emperor Penguin's master plan. Clearly it is to take over Penguin's role, but he looks like he has all these machinations, and then they all end up being nothing. So, I don't know. I hope this thing can manage to pull it together before we're really done with the story, but I'm not sure even how much longer we have with Emperor Penguin. I don't think it's much longer, honestly, so here's hoping. I'm going to give it, this particular one, the art is great. I like the origin for Man-Bat in this. It's decent, especially when you've got Man-Bats already existing. It's a clever way to get around it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'll give it a 7.5. It's just lacking that 8 quality that I'm looking for, but it's still very good. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next issue, but it's anyone's guess at this point. Batwing number 19, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Eduardo Pansica. So, last issue, Batwing basically said, all right, no more playing around, I'm done with this. And this issue straight up delivers on that in like every way. So, we open up in a graveyard where Batman is meeting up with David outside a costume. And he's basically saying, yeah, no, I've made my decision, Batman, and this isn't working out anymore. So let me just walk you through everything that I've already accomplished here. So first things first, Dawn gets back home, and she's, walked in her door. Batwing's inside, like, hey, you know where that kid is, whatever his name is, Ansel? Yeah, Ansel is, because you're the one who hit him. Where is he? And they just start really going at it. And Batwing's like, I'm not going to kill you. You know that's against my code. But I know about all of your bank accounts and all your family members. I will make your life a living hell. Tell me where Ansel is. And she's like, Jesus, all right, fine. He's down in Cape Town. He's at this hotel. And Batwing's like, cool. Also, you're out of this business. You are retired. Don't ever come back. So then he goes down to this hotel where he crashes in through the window of where Ansel is, and he's literally in the process of killing another woman. Like, the knife is against her throat. Just by happenstance. He can't help himself. So at that point, Ansel's like, psh, you can't get me. I'm a free man. I've beaten the rap once, I'll do it again. And Batwing's like, as I told someone else today, I'm not going to kill you, but I am going to hurt you really, really badly. And he throws Ansel into a pool and then shocks it with like 150,000 volts or something, enough to knock him out. And the woman that he was going to kill is like, is he dead? And Batwing says no. And she's like, he should be. So at that point, he ties up Ansel and then makes his way over to his father's mansion and says, hey, I know where your son is, and I'm going to kill him if you don't do everything I say. And he's like, what happened to my guards? He's like, I took them out. You're going to listen to me. And he takes the dad, throws him down on the desk. And Dad's like, I don't believe you. There's no way you found him. And so he shows a live stream video of his son bound and gagged and be like, here's the deal. Tell me where Sky Pirate is, because I really have a beef with that guy, and then I will let your son go to jail. He will not die, but he will go to jail. And he's like, oh, fine. He said he was going to rob one of my ships. And so Batwing takes him, throws him down on the ground, and says, by the way, you're retired as well. Don't ever let me catch you again. So then Sky Pirate's whole ship is hovering above this shipping container boat. And Batwing just blows it up. It all just crashes into the ocean, and I think they're all dead. Which really goes back on the whole I'm not going to kill you thing, but I don't see how anyone could survive that. So anyway, David, he gets out of his outfit. He goes to the hospital where Matu is, and they're saying, hey, he's not doing hot. He's not going to make it. Like, you got to go say goodbye to him. And so he spends the night by his bedside waiting for Matu to wake up. Finally, when dawn hits, he wakes up and says, like, David, just find something to make your life your own. Don't live with this burden of being Batwing. Just take the weight off your shoulders and live your own life on your own terms. And then he dies. And David's like super upset about that, but he takes the words super seriously, a la Uncle Ben. And so, posing as David, he talks to his friend in the police force, Kia, to get the location of Ansel, which is now within their jurisdiction. They take Ansel into the police station and say, all right, Kia made the arrest, so you don't have to worry about it coming back on me. I have nothing to do with this. Kia leaves to go book him, and then David just retires from the police force, saying, nah, you guys all suck. You're all corrupt. You're all dicks. I hate being here, and you hate me, so I'm just out. So he leaves, and then Kia catches up outside being like, oh my God, did you just quit? And he's like, yeah, I did. So I'm going to go and, change things in my life. I'm making a big shake up here, and I got to build a better me. And he kisses Kia and then goes on his way. And then we cut back to the Batman thing. And he's like, that's why I'm leaving Batwing behind. I've made my choice. I'm done with being Batwing. I'm going to do things my own way. And I don't need your symbol anymore. I'm going to do this as I need to. And Batman's like, I respect that. Here's a lead I got on this big thing that's going on in this area of the world. I hope that you can handle it. And he's like, yep, I got an idea on what I'm going to do with that. So all good. And Batman straight up says, you're always welcome in Batman Incorporated. So Batman then flies off, goes back to Gotham, and some time passes, and then he turns to Alfred in the Batcave and is like, I made a new Batwing suit that's better than all the other Batwing suits that they made down there in Africa. It can heal your bones, and it has like limited invisibility. It's super high tech and awesome, and it's made by Lucius Fox here in America. And Alfred says, oh, and now you're going to give it to your first choice for Batwing? Which feels like a weird gut punch that David wasn't the first choice to be Batwing. I don't know. It's just something for me. But either way, Batman says, yep, but I got to go get him and bring him to the bunker tonight after his fight. And it turns out he's fighting in an MMA fight, and we see that his dad was telling him, oh, you can't do this. You can't fight. It's not what you should be doing. He's like, oh, I've been fighting professionally since I was 16. I'm doing great. And it turns out, I'm just going to skip to the end, that this is Luke Fox, the son of Lucius Fox, the only son of Lucius Fox, he says. And Lucius wants him to, use his graduation from MIT to build something intelligent, but instead he's fighting MMA. So, yeah, there's going to be some family stuff there. But, okay. So we just screw the entire 19 issues then. Like, we just threw away all of that Africa stuff all in a single issue. And, I get it. It did feel like we were kind of building to the point where Batwing and the bat symbol was going to be more of a hindrance than it was a positive. But the fact that it seemed to me like David just wanted to kill these people. And it seems like he kind of did kill people, and that's why the bat symbol had to go, which is why I'm surprised that Batman's so okay with him doing that. Maybe I'm misreading that. Maybe it wasn't a killing thing, but he blew up Sky Pirate's ship, and I saw no survivors. So, got to be at least a little bit that. Overall, I mean, it felt like a rushed ending. Like, the fact he was able to just do all this in a single day, as far as I could tell, where he's been struggling with it for 3 or 4 issues now. It's just amazing to me. But I guess if you literally give him nothing, if you take away his Alfred, yeah, he's going to be pissed. As for Luke Fox, I mean, I've got no characterization on the guy. He's smart and he's a good fighter, but that's pretty much the entire Bat family. So I'm interested to see how they develop it a bit further. We've got new writers on it. I'm intrigued by them. Generally, I'm okay with the direction it's taking. It's just a hell of a whiplash from what we've had for so long. So yeah, I'll give this one I'll give it a 7. I'll give it a 7 flat. It's really close to that 0.5, but I think that it is just a little bit too fast. Like these are new writers coming in and just saying, all right, we're not just going to cliffhanger on the last issue. We are going to wrap it up, but we're going to wrap it up as fast as humanly possible and go a completely different route. Because, wow. Yeah. Action Comics number 19, written by Andy Diggle, art by Tony S. Daniel. So Grant Morrison finished his run last issue. Brand new team, brand new story. Kind of feels like closer to what's going on in Superman, but we open up in Karak, where it's 1 year ago. There's some thing going on, some upheaval politically, and Lois and Clark, along with a bunch of other reporters, are just chilling out in a bar, trying to get stories. Lois already has one. She's typing it up on her phone, and she's sending it off to the Daily Planet. And she's like, yep, that one's going to get me a Pulitzer. And she kind of starts flirting with Clark here. Mind you, this is a whole year ago, so it's possible he wasn't dating Wonder Woman at this point. But he's saying, yeah, Smallville, you got something about you. I don't know what it is. Maybe you just lose the Harry Potter glasses. And he starts to take them off when all of a sudden this kid comes in with a message for Clark saying, oh, this is your contact. You need to deal with this. And so Clark has to run out. And then we see another man come up and say like, oh, can I have a drink with you, Miss Lane? And turns out this is John Carroll, who I believe is the guy that Lois was seeing in Superman. So I guess this is a prologue or something. I don't know. Regardless, Superman turns into his outfit. He gets his nanite armor or whatever, and he flies off. And it turns out that there are a shipping container that is smuggling in illegal weapons. So he x-rays it, can't find anything, when all of a sudden this 2 or 3 giant mechs explode out of the shipping container. And he's like, all right, well, I won't beat you up too bad if you power down and tell me who's responsible. And this guy inside starts firing off missiles and crap, which seems to affect Superman. And he's like, well, he threw the first punch. I'm just going to do what I got to do now. And so he comes up and blasts right through the mech, takes the guy out of the cockpit, and is like, oh, you're an American. What are you doing here? And who sent you? And the guy sputters out like, oh, but look behind you. Turns out there's another mech firing off a whole bunch of missiles at it. Or at them, I should say. And Superman heat visions them all, takes them all out. And they use a sonic weapon to blast Superman down into the ocean nearby. He's like, well, that kind of hurt. But then he gets up out of the water and just takes the whole mech and just flips it on its head. And he's like, all right, well, who are you? What are you doing here? And who sent you? And as somebody gets out of the cockpit, it looks to be Jimmy Olsen. And Superman's like, what? He didn't look like that a sec. Why does he look like Superman, or why does he look like Jimmy Olsen now? And then all of a sudden, Jimmy just starts exploding from the inside. And Superman's like, somebody didn't want him to talk. I wonder who. And also, I'm positive that's not Jimmy Olsen. So then we cut over to Lex Luthor, who is talking to his therapist. And his therapist is like super nervous and scared. And Lex is like, now, doctor, I hired you because you've worked with like presidents and dictators and like really important people. You're the best there is. So tell me what you think of me, and please stop beating around the bush. And she's like, you're a psychopath. You are megalomaniacal, and you are going to basically be the most dangerous man on the planet. And she's like, okay, well, thank you for saying that. But here's the thing. I am all those things, and I don't care. So I just need the world to change for me, because I'm not going to bend down for the world. And he's like, all right, well, take some time, think about it some more. See you next week. And she's like, maybe then you'll set me free. And he's like, yeah, maybe then I'll set you free. Sure. So at that point, he walks out and says, keep an eye on her. She's probably going to commit suicide or something within the next few days. Also, how'd the Superman thing go? And he's like, oh, our mechs were destroyed. It was a complete failure. And he's like, not a complete failure. Turns out the missiles they were firing had an itty-bitty little microscopic bit of machinery in them made of kryptonite that made it into Superman's body, and therefore they have Superman's DNA on file. And so he's just going to wait, and then he's going to mess with Superman's DNA when it's most inconvenient. So that was all a year ago. 3 weeks later, after a year ago, so 49 weeks ago, Superman's just flying over the city. They activate the machine, and all of a sudden Superman's hand is in intense pain. He falls down out of the sky. Everyone's like, Superman, you cool? Everything great? I didn't see anything hit you. And he's like, keep back, I don't know what's going on. And he looks down at his hand, and it starts transforming into this grotesque-looking monster hand. And he's like, oh no, it's spreading. And that's the issue. Okay. Very different from what Grant Morrison was doing. Like, polar opposite of what it was doing. I'm wondering why this was set a year ago. I can't figure out any reason as of yet as to why it needs to be set a whole year ago. Unless we're still just pretending this is Superman's quote-unquote origin story, which, is it really? Yeah, no, it's an okay story. I can't find anything to really fault about it, but it's definitely just a first issue of like, oh, we're doing these big bombastic things and we're setting up mysteries. It's not great on actual storytelling, and the mysteries it's setting up, I'm like, okay, I guess. It's not even a mystery. They explained Lex did this thing, and here's how he did it. The mystery of it is, what precisely is he doing in Is he turning Superman into a monster? Is he... I don't know. I genuinely, I don't know what the story is moving forward here, but it's not as big enough of a mystery that I really care either. Because clearly Superman's just not going to spend the next 40 issues of the New 52 being a monster. Like, obviously. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not quite catching me yet. I'm waiting for something that's actually really interesting in this, and it's just not with this issue. But it's only one. It has a lot of time to find its footing. So art-wise, I thought it was good. I thought it looked pretty good throughout. Very stylized art. Tony S. Daniel did a great job. But writing-wise, it's just, okay, yeah, that's a thing that happened. What else you got? So I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a 7, just a flat 7. And most of that, like anything above a 6.5 is strictly because of the art. It's writing-wise, it's probably closer to a 6. But first issue, I'll give it the 6.5 on writing, 7 for the art. Earth 2, number 11, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. So last issue, the pair of Khalid and Jay went into the Tower of Fate to get the helmet because Wotan wanted them to. This issue goes back to ancient Egypt and has Wotan fighting against Nabu, like the original Nabu. Wotan, by the way, a woman sorcerer who I think might have been like Scandinavian or something. And Nabu's like, you can't beat me, look what I can do. And he brings the whole Sphinx to life to fight against her. And it turns out this is just Wotan telling the story to Jay Garrick's mom. And it's just like, yeah, nah, I made myself immortal as best I could in my limited power, but it turns out it didn't keep me from dying. It just made it so that every time I'm reborn, I have memories of my old life and the ability to still do magic. So I'm like, you know, able to kind of technically immortal. And she's like, okay, so what happened? And he's like, oh, well, you know, I fought, it didn't work, he beat me, and then in order to make me he knew that I was immortal in my weird way, so he made it so that every time we met up, I would look weird. He gave me green skin. And she's like, that's weird. And he's like, I know, right? It's made my life hell. I've been born with green skin like several dozen times. And she's like, okay, well, anyway, you sent my son in there to get the helmet of Nabu. What happens if he can't do it? And he's like, oh, well, I'm going to kill you. I'm also evil. So then we see inside the tower, Jay's outrunning the great beast with Khalid holding on, and they just escape. Like, there's no fight. There's barely even 3 panels dedicated to it. They just escape the great beast. And Jay's like, okay, here's the thing. I'm just doing my best here. I really am not that skilled with these powers yet, but I gotta be a hero. So I'll go and figure out what to do with the great beast. You are the only one who can track down Nabu's helmet, so go do that. And he's like, wow, you really inspired me, Jay. Bye. And just goes on his own way. And Khalid starts talking to the helmet. Like the helmet says, oh, I can sense you here. I knew you'd be back. I knew you couldn't resist my power. And he's like, that's not what's going on at all. But yeah, I do need to find you. So can you tell me where you are? And he's like, just follow your senses. So then we see Jay is still wandering around the tower. He comes across the great beast before it manages to find him. And he's like, okay, should I like follow it and then engage if it gets too close to Khalid? Or should I like hang back and attack it now so that way it doesn't get to him? And he's like, I think I should attack it now because I can't risk him finding Khalid before he can do it. And somehow he manages to tip off the beast. It gets the upper hand on him, and Jay is caught inside of its grip. Then we just stop everything, and we cut over to Durain, which is the country where Steppenwolf is, and he's talking to his daughter, Fury, I think, and saying, hey, I need you to go do something for me. We found someone. He's on this earth. He's been hiding for a while, and we need you to go get him. And Fury's like, I kind of want to be here. And she's like, suck it up. You're going to go find him. And he's like, fair enough. Where am I going? And he says, you're going to America. You're going to what's left of Gotham after we laid siege to it. And you're going to go get Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. And then we just don't deal with that anymore. So then we go back into the Tower of Fate, and the helmet's talking to us saying, find me, you know how you can find me. He's like, I am literally in a maze right now. Can you please just like present yourself to me? And he's like, nope, you really gotta want it. That's an actual quote. You really have to want it. And he says like, oh, I knew you were here. You need the power because I could solve those mysteries that are in your life. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I really don't care. But what about what happened to your guardian, Mr. Kent Nelson? And he's like, I don't care about solving that. He died, so what? And he's like, fair enough. I'm right here. And then the helmet just shows up in front of Khalid. And he's like, oh, you will be my vessel for my power. And in return, he's like, yeah, I'll go crazy. I know what's up. And he's like, no, it's not like crazy. It's prophecy and it's omens and stuff. Like, it's a good thing. You just got to learn to hone it. And if you wear the helmet for long enough, like 20, 30 years, you're not going to hear my voice anymore. You're going to have full control over it, and it'll be your power. But, you know, you will be fate. And he's like, I'm a doctor of archaeology. If I'm going to be anything, I'm going to be Dr. Fate. I've earned my degree. And the helmet's like, okay, the name doesn't really matter. Just put on the helmet. And Khalid's like, fair enough. So he puts on the helmet. Jay's, barely managing to be a thing. He's like, oh, by the way, what made you change your mind? He's like, oh, Jay told me I could be a hero. That was it. He inspired me. So he puts on the helmet and he becomes Fate. As Jay is on the ropes with the Great Beast, Khalid shows up and is like, thank you. You've shown me the true path of being a hero, and now I will use my magic to help save people. And he has the full Dr. Fate outfit on. He's like, now let's go save your mama. And that's it. That's the issue. Okay, so I am so bored of Wotan just talking. For the love of God, just do something, anything. Throw a punch. Make some tea. Do anything. It's just him talking about, like, here's why I've been wronged, and here's my history, and here's my power, and here's why I'm doing this. It's like, dude, not only are you not talking to any of the heroes, you're talking to one of the heroes' moms, but you're just talking. Just do something, anything. I don't care what. Make like a cooler prison for the mom. Just do anything. But instead, if you're able to just have conversations with your prisoners, you're not doing enough to prove to me that you're a villain. Maybe that's a long-term goal, but it's just bothering me every time Wotan shows up with how boring of a villain it is. As for inside the tower stuff, it's fine. I don't feel like Jay really inspired anything. He's just like, I'm just doing my best. And Kelly's like, wow. Yeah, all right, inspiring, sure. As for Dr. Fate itself, I like that. Dr. Fate looks cool as hell. I think they did a decent job of elaborating, like, what the helmet's powers actually are in terms of, magic, but also prophecy, which makes sense for Fate. So, yeah, I'm into that. And then the weird little Mr. Miracle thing. Like, they're new gods. Steppenwolf is a new god. I get it. But, they better explain this a little bit better as to why Mr. Miracle is in the ruins of Gotham. Because I need more than that. I need a little bit more than just, he was just around. He's just chilling with his girlfriend. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's plenty. Thank you. So yeah, overall, it's a meh issue, which kind of sucks because it feels like it should have been the big climax of we finally have Dr. Fate. And while that is the coolest point in the issue, I don't think it's enough to really save the issue as a whole. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 6 sounds too low. 6.5 sounds too high, but I will give it the 6.5. It's just, I don't know what I'm hoping for, but like this whole arc is just, the purpose of it seems to be building up to Dr. Fate. And now that we actually have him, I felt like it wasn't building up anything at all the whole time. It just was kind of a, whatever, we'll get to it when we get to it sort of thing. It feels more like an in-betweener story than it is a major plot piece in building up this team that they are clearly trying to do. So, yeah, 6.5. Green Arrow number 19, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So last issue, Green Arrow was falling off of a building because he had his grappling line cut by Komodo. And this issue kind of picks up with that, but first we get the flash to now, where Oliver has made it to the Black Mesa in Arizona. He thinks he sees Magus inside one of the canyons, and he readies his bow, but then the person disappears, and he's like, I'm sick of it. Could someone just give me some answers, please? So then we cut back to 3 weeks earlier. Oliver's still falling off the building, and you get the whole record scratch. Now, I know this looks bad, but I got a way out of it. And he grabs onto the building, somehow not snapping his arms, right next to where Komodo is. And police helicopters got their lights on him, and he's like, all right, this guy killed, like, my friends, and I'm not going to let him kill anybody else, even if it means I end up dying. And he takes out an arrow and stabs it into Komodo's foot, which sends him toppling off the building. But then he reaches back, grabs hold of Oliver, and brings them both down. Oliver shoots out a foaming arrow so that it will bubble up and they'll land in something soft. Mind you, the whole narration throughout the issue is basically Oliver repeatedly saying, sometimes you just don't think, you just act, because thinking is going to be that split-second difference between dying and living. So then we cut to Komodo's bunker, where Naomi is there still alive, and she's like, hey, I told your dad everything I knew about Green Arrow. Can I go home now? And Komodo's daughter's like, no. In fact, you should be happy that you're even alive, let alone staying here. And she's like, wow, you're just a bundle of sunshine, ain't you? By the way, your dad is going to lose to Green Arrow. I hope you know that. Nobody can beat his charisma. And the kid basically says, well, we'll see about that. But if my dad does end up falling, I'll be there to take his place. So Oliver pops out of the goop, as does Komodo. He's on the comms with Henry, but they're going in and out. And as he readies an arrow at Komodo, Komodo gets the drop on him and kicks him from behind and basically saying like, oh, you have no idea what you're doing with that bow. You're not equipped to deal with it. And he's like, yeah, all right, whatever. Just show me what you got. So they fire off arrows at each other. And, you know, they're pretty close range, but the arrows collide in midair and hit. But the issue is Oliver accidentally grabbed the wrong arrow. He grabbed the exploding tip arrow. So they collide in midair, and then they both explode outwards. And Oliver manages to grab onto some scaffolding. And somehow Komodo manages to already be there waiting for him. And he's like, oh, is your little toy broken? Because he broke his bow in the explosion. And Komodo just fires off some arrows into the air, and they all land in, like, the arms and legs and shoulders of Oliver. And he's like, oh, I'll just repeat it. Don't you know that a true archer doesn't even need a bow or an arrow, only a target? You know who told me that? Your father, right before I killed him. And Oliver's like, well, hold on. No, my dad died in a helicopter crash while I was on the island. Komodo's like, you really believe that? That's a stupid backstory. I'm the one who killed him, and I shot him right between the eyes, and he looked at me the same way you're looking at me now. And then the police helicopter shows up, distract him for a second, just like, lower your weapons. Long enough for Oliver to grab Komodo's bow and use one of his few remaining arrows into the shoulder of Komodo. And he's like, all right, Komodo, first I get some answers and then you die. So he's about to take off Komodo's mask. Henry gets back onto the comms saying, hey, the helicopters are like really wanting to shoot at you guys, so maybe get out of there soon. He's like, yeah, first let me get some answers. And as he's about to pull it off, he gets shot in the back, and turns out that Emiko, the daughter of Komodo, has geared up and is already out there. And Komodo's like, get back to the... I didn't tell you could show up. And he's like, shush, I had this under control, Dad. So Oliver starts getting ready to shoot at her as she's distracted by the helicopter as well, making demands. But in between the time where he pulls out his arrow and like pulls it taut, which he can do pretty damn fast, she's already turned back and fired an arrow again at Oliver and snaps his bowstring and already has another shot ready to go by the time he realizes that. And it's like, okay, this isn't good. This kid's totally outclassing me in like every way. I gotta bail. So he calls up Henry on the line saying, hey, do you have my location? Meet me like down on the street on the west side. And so he jumps down a trash chute that was set up for construction waste. And he's like, I don't have any foaming arrows, so I got to hope that I just don't like die at the bottom of this. And he lands in a bunch of construction materials. He's got arrows popping out of all of his limbs. He's clearly not doing well. The cops up in the helicopter are shot at by Komodo, who just shoots him straight in the head through the helicopter windshield, causing this massive explosion. And Emiko's like, Dad, those were police. And he's like, they're nothing anymore. Gotta remember, kiddo, this is war. So Henry drives up, manages to grab Oliver, throws him in the truck. And Oliver's like, okay, I'm going to be fine. I'm only bleeding out a little bit. I got to pull this arrow out because it is not okay where it currently is, like in my bone. And yeah, everything will be fine. So he has a few flashbacks to his father, telling him like, oh, you just need a little help, Ollie. Never give up. Never surrender. So he pulls out the thing and passes out. And that's where the issue ends. Okay. I think it was pretty obvious from last issue when we saw the photo of Emerson, who is clearly Komodo. Not Emerson's Komodo, but like the third guy who's clearly Komodo. And Oliver Queen's dad. That they are all going to be related to the same sort of like, oh, something happened and whatever else. So I'm not that shocked with the whole reveal of, oh, I killed your father. It seemed obvious. I think that's pretty clear of, yeah, he clearly doesn't like Oliver Queen, and I'd imagine that's a bloodline thing. So I'm not that shocked by that twist, but the story really plays it off as this is the big thing you didn't see coming. And I'm like, all right, well, kind of did though. The reverse of that though is Emiko being that damned good. That is definitely something I didn't expect to see coming. I thought she would have been more of an amateur and then built up her abilities, but no, she's better than Oliver already. So yeah, I'm interested in that. Art-wise, Sorrentino, killing it whole way through. They do this thing in moments where they show Oliver focusing, where only the color green is used. Really like that. And with the inking that they've got going on with Sorrentino stuff, it really does work. So overall, I got to give this one like a, I got to give it like an 8.5, honestly. It's just really, really good. I really do enjoy it. So the only thing keeping it from a higher rating is the fact of it's so quick to read, and while that's not inherently a bad thing, it just left me wanting more at the end, you know? So 8.5 though, still fantastic. World's Finest number 11, written by Paul Levitz, art by Ken Lashley, Barry Kitson, and Robson Rocha. So last issue basically was a non-starter because they had an entire thing about Robin dying. So this issue just kind of does a redo. So we pick up with Huntress, who has discovered where all of the super high-tech weaponry is being distributed in Mali, and she follows the head of the organization home and basically jumps him there, ties him up, and says, all right, I'm going to have you arrested, and I've gotten the information I need, blah, blah, blah. So you're done with. And she sneaks out the window and leaves. And then we cut to Karen, who is currently running some sort of gala, some sort of like tech event. It's hard to say, but regardless, she is hoping to get someone from Holt Industries to arrive to explain what in the hell's going on with that. So we then go back to Huntress, who is breaking into the Holt mansion in LA, saying like, all right, well, take two. Let's see if we can make this work. And she breaks in. She's ready for the T-spheres this time, so she takes them out. And as she goes into the computer trying to get in via the same passwords, she's opened fire upon by two security guys, you know, trained in military or whatever. And they're saying like, oh, geez, this must be important if they're using military people. So Huntress fires an arrow, takes out one of them, and she baits another one via taking off her mask and setting it so it's just peeking out to the side. So the guy calls in saying, oh, Mr. Holt, we got her. She's taken care of. And he's like, good, I'll send a cleanup squad. But then, of course, she gets the drop on him, and it's just like, huh, okay. He said Mr. Holt, like, that means he's still alive. What in the heck is going on around here? But regardless, it's going to be something that's going to come back to Karen before coming back here. So she takes off to find Karen. Then we cut to 42 months ago, because we keep doing this flashback thing. And turns out that Huntress did her research and found out where the office of the science advisor to the president is. And they're going to try to break into that computer because that would probably be a computer that would have knowledge of alternate Earths and a way to get back home if they knew about it at all. So they go down into the underground computer bunker, is the best way I can describe it. And Karen takes care of the security guards by just knocking them out. And when she comes back, Helena's like, yeah, no, I searched. They don't know anything. They're idiots here. They have no idea what parallel Earths are. They're stupid, and there's no way we're going to be able to get back home. And then she specifically says that parallel Earths is all just science fiction, written under silly pseudonyms like Fox and, get this, Dick. Hilarious. So at that point, Karen's like, okay, look, calm down. We just got to get out of here, and we'll figure out something else to do. So they fly out over DC, and we cut back to Vegas now, where it's whatever this event is. It says private party celebrating with Holt Industries. There's a red carpet pretty much. Karen is, of course, taking in the limelight while Helena sneaks off to the back, heads into a club, and she's like, okay, there's a lot of security in here, like more so than usual, so something suspicious is going on, but I don't quite know where to begin yet, so I'll just sit and wait. And then this guy comes up and says, hey, what are you doing besides making the room more beautiful? And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to pass. And he's like, oh, come on, give me a chance. And she's like, I did, you failed. So she walks off. She sees Michael Holt up on stage with this band, and he's like, oh, give another hand to our wonderful musicians. Aren't they great? And Karen's like, Michael, hey, what's going on? I thought you were gone. And he steps off. He's like, hey, Karen, good to see you. It's been so long. And she starts to apologize for stealing the quantum tunnel from him. And he's like, oh, hush, hush, hush. Let's just enjoy the moment. And as he leans in, his face starts to transform into a horrific-looking figure. And seemingly everyone else can see it as well. Turns out this wasn't Michael Holt. This was Desaad, a apocalyptic general, I guess, a torture master, whatever you want to call it. And that's the issue. Okay. Like, as someone who is reading Earth 2 as well, I knew this wasn't Michael Holt, or at least it wouldn't make any sense to be Michael Holt, so clearly that was always going to be a twist. The fact it's Desaad, I don't know. Something about this entire plot going on just seems so wildly unfocused, and I think it comes back to the fact that they keep doing these flashbacks of when they were really focused. Like all of these flashbacks of Helena being, I want to learn how to get home. And it seems like that should be the focus of the modern day stuff if they're showing it so much in the flashbacks, but it's not. Instead, the focus of the story is more so of a, okay, we've accepted our lives here, but there's a bunch of apocalyptic tech. But maybe as a consequence of having to stop itself for, like, the Damien stuff, it doesn't feel like it's focused on that either. Like, the fact that she just came in, found how all the weapons are being traded, and then left the guy to be taken in by police, it seems like that should have been a whole little mini story arc on its own. But instead, it's 3 pages of this book. It just seems very unfocused to me on what it is it's trying to do. And maybe at some point, 3-4 issues from now, there'll be something that like ties it all up and says, ah, yes, I was the one who did Desaad. He says, like, I'm the one who did all this. I made your lives hell for so long. I'd be okay with that. But it doesn't feel like we're going in that direction. It just feels kind of like, okay, well, you know, they're in this scenario now, and they got to do with this thing now. And it just kind of feels aimless. So overall, not an awful book, but definitely not something that feels like it has a goal in mind, like it is working towards something. It just feels like we have to have 52 titles, and this is something that's interesting at the very least. So, yeah, I mean, it is. It's a good concept. I just wish you did more with it. So overall, I'll give this one I gotta give it like a 6, and that sounds harsh because I don't dislike it that much, but it's just aimless. It feels like that over the past like 7 issues, nothing has happened with our characters. There's been no growth. There's been no action, really. It's just been, okay, we handle this thing and then we move on to the next. It feels like a weekly comic, but I'm getting it monthly. So yeah, 6. Stormwatch number 19, written by Jim Starlin, art by Yves Guichet. Okay, so Last issue doesn't even matter, because this issue opens up with a bunch of crazy-looking aliens staring at the Earth saying, well, this is a problem. Let's reset the timeline. And then they just do. They pick the magenta timeline, and they just reset it. And we see the beginning of time, Adam 1 shows up, and he's like, oh, hey, this is familiar. Wait a minute. This isn't right. Something's different. And then he's killed by one of these aliens. And then we see everything kind of just shudder for like 3 panels. And Midnighter and Apollo just disappear. And the wreck of the Eye of the Storm out in space is also gone. And seemingly the moon is also fixed or something, because it focuses on the moon, but like nothing happens with it. And then they say, all right, now next to a black hole, something comes out of it. Got all that? Now it's just rebuilding the team again. So there is a new Skywatch, and one of the Shadow Lords from before, now being called Storm King, he's like, hey, guy named Storm Control, who's a new character, who is now their like leader of the team, who just wears a mask. He's like, hey, we detected that Stormwatch was erased from this timeline. We exist outside of time, so it didn't affect us. And Storm Control's like, that's weird. Anyway, what does that have to do with me? And they're like, oh, well, you're going to be the leader of the new Stormwatch, so go ahead and throw a team together. And Storm Control's like, can do. And his identity is purposely kept secret for some reason. I don't know. Regardless, they're saying how they need to get hyper-powered individuals from the planet as best as they can. So we cut down to South Africa, where a woman is walking through, trying to find a dangerous dope addict named Jamar. And we see, I'm just going to skip the little mystery here, is Angie, engineer. She looks like a human, though, but she is able to transform into her engineer form and starts attacking this guy with weaponry, because he's being assaulted by 2 larger supers, I guess. I think named D and Dumb. I don't think they're Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They're just named D and Dumb. Regardless, Apollo is also introduced. Apparently he was abducted by aliens when he was a kid and now has his powers. Midnighter, same deal, abducted by aliens, but he got out 5 years before Apollo. They are now just in a relationship, like it's not even a question, they just are. So then we get introduced to a new guy named Hellstrike, who's able to use energy abilities, and a different guy named Weird, who is a being from another dimension which took over a dead guy's body and is now able to transform it and control its density and whatnot. So he's also on the team. Meanwhile, this whole time, Engineer's basically just trying to take down these guys, and she's doing fine on her own. Like, it's a standard-ass fight scene that's occasionally interrupted by her saying, yes, Storm Control, what do you need? Just know that's happening. Then we meet someone from a London asylum named Jenny Soul, who is a powerful telepath with some telekinesis, which is so weird that it's not Jenny Quantum. We've just got a totally different Jenny. Just different timeline, different Jenny. Just roll with it. And so that's pretty much all the team as far as I think. The only other guy left is that they have a guy, an alien called a Vulgarian, who is named the Forecaster. And he's the triplets from Minority Report that are able to see stuff and get people distributed where they need to be. It's an early warning system. And he's like, there's psychic emissions coming from a planet called Dooley 7. Should deal with that. And so the Shadow Lord's like, right on. All right, call the team together and let's get it started. So Engineer gets this guy named Jamar out of there and to the satellite where he's going to be treated for his opium addiction. And I guess they'll use him for something. It's hard to say. Regardless, we see Apollo and Midnighter, and they're like, hey, we got to go. There's a mission, and they get all lovey-dovey on each other. And everyone's brought together to the main table where the Shadow Control is like, all right, we got our first mission as a team. We know you've kept it out of the limelight, and that's going to continue that way because this first one is out on Dooley 7, where there's some psychic problem. And he lays out how all the teams are going to lay out Jenny Soul is going to investigate the psychic stuff. Hellstrike is going to be in charge of the away team. And Apollo and Midnighter and I think Engineer are all going to be in there. And they say, all right, you guys don't mention Earth. Don't say anything about it. You're just going to head down to the planet and consider everyone down there a potential enemy. We don't know what we're up against. And as we zoom in on the planet, we see in one of the alleyways of one of their cities is Lobo. Just standard issue Lobo with a bra on his head and a beer in his hand. And he's like, what the heck? And one of the aliens that reset the timeline says, perfect, Lobo, you are exactly what our plan requires. Okay. They reset the whole goddamn timeline. And they know they did. And it affects nothing else except for Stormwatch. I understand Jim Starlin's coming in and he's like, hey, I got this idea buzzing around in my head. I don't want to deal with any of the back issues and all the other stuff. I just want to wipe the slate clean and go with it. So they invented an alternate timeline to keep it in continuity while still making it out of I am so baffled by the existence of this issue. I can't even begin. They just threw away everything. And like, not even in a way that's like respectful, where it's like, okay, well, you know, that stuff happened, but we're still doing this new stuff. It's like, no, it never existed. All the things you read about are gone. This is the reboot within the reboot. That's insanity. I am losing it. Oh my God. Okay. As for what it is on its own, ignoring the reboot aspect, the reset as they call it, do I like it? They did a whole thing where, all right, they spent just as much time introducing Midnighter and Apollo in this new universe, and Engineer as well, as they did Hellstrike and Weird and Jenny Soul, when those last ones were the ones that really needed it. I think that despite the fact Jim Starlin had an idea of, you know, I don't want to start with anything else, I want to make this pretty much a new jumping on point, which it is, I think that for anybody who has been reading the book, it makes far more sense to just work with what we had. You know, we didn't need completely new things for Apollo and Midnighter. Just say they're the same characters, and then over the course of the book, show us how they're different. Instead, he's treating them like brand new. And I think that just makes it weaker, because now I'm having to split time amongst 6 people who are all technically new, rather than the 3 who are new and 3 old ones that could have linked the gap. So, and not even mentioning Shadow Control and the Forecaster. Those things just barely even like covered it all. I don't know. It's a lot. It is a lot to get into. We're going to be dealing with this for the next 10 issues. So we'll see where we get. But overall, I got to give this one I'm giving it a 6.5. The 0.5 is simply because I think that it has the potential to do something great, but I think this was a poor first outing in that all it was and the way they intercut with the Engineer stuff, it was a confusing read the whole way through, because they're introducing the teammates and then just cutting back to Engineer's story rather than, you know, showing these teammates doing something. So 6.5, that's the highest I can go. Animal Man number 19, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Steve Pugh. So, last issue, Animal Man's son Cliff died, and this is the funeral. So, we open up San Diego. It seems that Buddy is staying at a hotel for the time being, and he's getting ready that morning. We cut back to the Baker home, and Ellen is basically just holed up in bed. It doesn't seem like she's left for several days. Her mother is taking care of Maxine, and the mother comes in and says, like, Ellen, it's time to go. You got to do this. And she's like, no, I don't have to do anything now. My son is dead. And she's like, yeah, fair enough. I mean, but like, Maxine does need you, and it would be nice for you to show your final respects to your son. And I mean, yeah, you don't have to go, but it's probably for the best. And we see Buddy getting ready. He puts on a suit and tie, ties his shoes, and then he just breaks down crying on the edge of the bed, where Ellen just seems broken. Cut to the funeral as he's being read his last rites and whatnot. Buddy looks over at Ellen, and they lock eyes for just a second as Ellen just looks away angrily. And yeah, no, the funeral just finishes. Everybody goes home one by one. And as Ellen is leaving with Maxine, Buddy tries to stop her, and Maxine tells her, Mom, stop. And Buddy wants to talk to her and says, look, we need to talk. And she's like, no, not now. That's like maybe in a while, but not now. But Buddy puts forward the idea that Maxine is still connected to the Red, and she might be able to bring him back. And Ellen gets pissed at this. She's like, no more powers. We're not doing that anymore. Our son is dead. Just let him rest in peace, for God's sakes. And Buddy's like, she's not normal. She has these powers, whether you like it or not, and we should be using them to save our son. And then Buddy just gets slapped by Ellen saying, like, no, we're not doing this. We're done. Every time I look at you, all I do is see him. And Ellen's like, Buddy asked Ellen, what are you saying? And Ellen says, we're done. Like, it's over. So Ellen walks away with Maxine. Buddy's just walking down the street, and he's accosted by a bunch of reporters that are standing outside his hotel, and they're like, oh, Buddy, how was the divorce? Or how was the funeral? Are you divorcing your wife? Was this all just a propaganda thing for your new film? And Buddy freaks out on this guy, and rightfully so, saying, like, my son just died. What in the hell is wrong with you? And he smashes the guy's camera saying, you want a freak show? Here's a freak show. And then he flies off saying that if any of them ever go near Buddy's family, he will kill them personally. So then we cut over to Maxine, who walks into her room, and she calls out for Socks, who apparently has been hiding here the whole time without Maxine's mom's knowledge. And she puts forward to Socks like, hey, my dad said I could do this. I could bring back Cliff. Is that a thing I can do? And Socks says, no, he's dead. You can't undo death. Like, that is a part of it. But he is a part of the Red now. Like, I know that's confusing, but you just have to accept it. But Buddy seems the one that's unable to accept it. He uses his powers to fly out to the red tree that Maxine took him to before, and he takes off his suit and gets absorbed into it. And he's like, I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to convince the totems that if they can't give Cliff back, they at least need to make sure Maxine is never going to be a part of this again. She did her purpose. She stopped the rot. We're done. Like, she's not needed as a totem anymore. So he makes his way back into the Red, and one of the guards is there like, they don't really want to be disturbed right now. And Buddy's like, oh yeah, they don't want to be disturbed. Open the damn door. And we see Shepard come up saying, Buddy, you've got a lot of angry thoughts in your head right now, and you have every right to feel those. But cool off before you go in there, because they are not the understanding type. And he's like, yeah, well, neither am I. So he kicks down the door and talks to the totems, and he's like, look, you can stick your damn rules where the sun don't shine. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to keep my daughter out of this. You are going to give her her life back. And you are going to make it so that neither of us have anything to do with the Red anymore. And the totems all look at each other for a second, and then one of them scoops up Buddy, and they're like, how dare you talk to us like that? We are bigger than you could ever hope to be, and to be our champion like Maxine is an honor. And the fact that you are trying to take her away, no, she belongs to us the same way that you do. But we're not gonna let you just storm in here ever again. We are cutting off your connection to the Red. You'll still be able to use your stupid little superhero powers, but you will never be able to connect to the Red the way you have now ever again. And he strips all the flesh off his bone, reconstitutes him in his Animal Man costume out somewhere else. And he's like, okay, I still have my powers. I can still feel them, but I can't feel my connection to the Red at all. It's gone. I can't feel any other living being. And I have never felt so alone in my life. And that's where the issue ends. So this is how you do a goddamn epilogue. Dear Lord, this is heart-wrenching. This is awful, but in a good way. It's so miserable. Like, yeah, these people have been through hell, actual literal hell, and yeah, they're going to come out it way different. Like, not everything's all sunshine and rainbows. In just one day, Buddy has lost his son, his wife, and now his connection to this bigger thing that he could only barely comprehend. Like, this issue did a great job selling that. It did a great job selling this grief. And the first like 3-4 pages of just them prepping for the funeral, they take it slow. They keep it mostly in silence. Like, it's great. It's a fantastic issue. If I had any criticisms at all, it would just be that I don't think they do a good enough job of explaining specifically, ignoring the ethical reasons, ignoring why they physically can't bring back Cliff. Because, like, in the very beginning of this book, Maxine brought back, like, dead pets. I feel like Cliff should still be on the table, and they just kind of don't explain that, but for the sake of not undoing just every major death, I get it. I just kind of want more of an explanation, but that is the smallest criticism compared to how well this book is written. So, yeah, overall, I'm going to give this one... I kind of want to say 9, but it seems, I don't know. I feel like it's got to have a lot extra special for it for 9, but I can't think of any reason not to. So I'm going to give this one the 9. I think it is fantastic. It's a very well written book. The art is great throughout. I have no real qualms with it. So yeah, great ending to a great saga, if this is the ending of it. Dial H number 11, written by China Miéville, art by Alberto Ponticelli. So last issue, we had the hero dial and the sidekick dial both being used by Roxy and Nelson, respectively. And then Roxy told Nelson, hey, do whatever you want to do. And they started making out. And then this issue continues on. Well, first we got a brief little glimpse over to Centipede, who... he abducted the leader of the Church of the Dial and has basically been keeping him in a military place. And a bunch of soldiers come checking him, being like, sir, we're supposed to be in there with you. And he's like, right, sorry, come on in. And as he lets them in, he immediately holds them hostage and like kills them, saying, okay, I need you to not be here, so I'm just going to take you out so I can focus on the Church of the Dial thing. And basically what they're having him do is they've hooked him up to this machine saying, we need you to pray really, really hard for our plans to work. But then we cut over to Nelson, who wakes up naked in bed. And he's like, oh, God, did we do the thing? He looks over and Roxy's there. He's like, oh, geez, we did oh, God, what happened? And Roxy wakes up and just like, yes, we did it. We don't have to make this weird. Nelson, let's just talk about it. But he's immediately like, oh, where's my other shoe? I got a thing. I got a doctor's appointment at the dentist. And as he reaches under the bed, he finds the dial. And he's like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to take the dial because it's my turn. I'm just gonna use it now. And so he flips the dial and immediately seems to disappear. And Roxy's like, Jesus, all right. She puts on her headset, asks if Nelson can hear her, and all of a sudden there's this whooshing noise back and forth. And she's like, Nelson, like, what's going on? Are you a teleporter? What's going on? And we see a piece of paper. It keeps on getting more words written on it every time it goes past, saying, Roxy, help, I can't stop. And Roxy yells out for Nelson, like, Nelson, you can control this just like any other powers. Just think about it and stop. And then all of a sudden he stops and we see Nelson has the costume and look of the Flash. So cutting back to Centipede, he's interrogating this priest saying like, all right, here's an image of the exchange that you guys worship. What does this mean to you? And he's like, oh, well, that's heaven. And it's like, okay, it's a land of possibilities, I agree, including war. As we can see, there's this war going on in the image between this group and this other group, dialers and whatnot. And as he basically elaborates, he's like, here's what I know. Here's what I think at the very least. The dialers are the warriors of the exchange. They hunt at the exile that they called O and the dials themselves. O was like the original dialer. These guys are going around using the dials in order to basically get them back. And there's this guy called the Fixer, who's the one who came out of the Abyss back at the end of like issue 5 and took the dial that Ex Nihilo was using. And was able to use the Abyss as like a door to get over there. And that's the end game that Centipede's working on, is to reopen that door to let out the Fixer again. At that point, Centipede gets a call from his commanding officer being like, okay, clearly we may have gone too far with this, Centipede. Was it the mask? Was the mask what sent you too far? But regardless, I need you to stand down. And he's just like, hey, all I'm trying to be is a real Canadian hero, you know? And now I'm realizing, after everything that's said and done, I'm not a hero at all. So then we cut back to Roxy, and Nelson's just talking at super speed. He's like, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe it. This is so fast. This is so cool, whatever. And Roxy's like, lays down like, hey, if you're the Flash, what happened to the real one? And immediately Nelson is hit by like this memory burst. Like, I was in Iron Heights. They have Iris. I have to go stop Trickster. Like, what is all this? And he's literally referencing Flash 18 and all the events that were happening at that point. And he's just like, you're right, I got to go find Flash. So he runs off to Central City and he's looking for Flash everywhere. And he's like, I can't find him. He's not there. I am the Flash. The Flash is gone and I am now him. And Roxy's like, I don't know what's happening. We've never dialed a hero that actually exists. And at that moment, a light bulb goes off in her head. She's like, crap, do you remember the Zero issue where there was a story of like a dialer way back in like prehistoric times? And rumor was she was killed by someone that she had dialed into, who was screaming about like revenge and whatnot. And Nelson realizes, like, are you kidding? We're stealing powers? That's what the dial does, is it steals powers from other superheroes for like what? How long has this been going on? What have we been doing? And Roxy's like, I don't know. I didn't think this was what was going on. I thought we were just generating heroes. And Nelson's worried, like, what was he doing when I stole his powers? Is he dead now? Did I kill the guy who is the Flash? And so he grabs Roxy, runs outside. They're just in the forest outside because he needs to clear his head. And he basically just starts tearing into Roxy, saying like, oh, hey, yeah, no, why don't you use the superhero dial? Maybe we can, or the sidekick dial. Maybe we could steal Superman's flight as he's flying over the Atlantic. And Roxy's kind of upset that he keeps on blaming her for this when she genuinely didn't know. Going back to Centipede, he's finally taken full advantage of the priest to the point where his brain and his whole body is literally melting in front of his eyes. And as such, the portal begins to open up. And Centipede sees the Fixer coming through. He's like, how did you call me? How did you open this gate? And he's like, look, use the dial, turn into a telepath, read my mind to know I'm telling you the truth. This isn't an attack. I know where there are more dials, and I can bring you to them. But we need to work as a team. So he turns into a telepath and reads his mind. But then they start talking about it. They're like, okay. And this is going back to Roxy and Nelson. All right, let's just walk through this. What does this mean? Like, Ex Nihilo was able to use the dial and take hero powers, but for some reason Centipede wasn't. Why is that? And they reason out that maybe Ex Nihilo, she was like true of heart. She genuinely thought she was a hero. But Centipede knows that he's a villain, and so it wasn't letting him dial, which means that this guy must be worse than that. So at that point, Nelson feels there's a vibration in the dial, something's going on, and he takes her all the way to the Rocky Mountains to get away from what's happening. But then, right on schedule, Centipede and the Fixer show up, and he recognizes Fixer as the shadow on the line, and so he goes to attack him. Absolutely can't. The Fixer's got way more abilities than he does, and he knows how to use them, so they run out as far as they can. They just keep on trying to outrun, but Fixer keeps on catching up until finally Nelson collapses and runs out of flash powers right outside of Sydney, Australia. And Roxy's like, you got to give me the dial. I can hopefully get something that'll get us out of here. And as they're about to change the dial over, Centipede steals it. And we see Fixer literally tearing the sky open like it was just a cloth. And he's coming after Nelson and Roxy. And that's the book. Okay, so I think because we read the Zero issue, it wasn't that much of a surprise that it's stealing powers. I feel like that's kind of the big twist of this book is like, oh my god, they're realizing that they're stealing powers. But we already knew that, so it doesn't come as that big of a shock. But I do like the synergy it's got going on with Flash because, yeah, this did all happen in Flash, like 18, where he just lost his powers all of a sudden, and they said, check out Dilate to see what happened. I like that sort of, because these books are so different. Flash and Dilate, there's no reason they should work together, but they do in this way that just feels natural. So I really do enjoy that. Again, this book feels like mostly this specific issue, the explanation. They're like, okay, we've discovered this new thing, and let's just logic it out to its reasonable conclusion. And then next issue is going to be the big bombastic action stuff. So I like when this book takes the time to have these little sit downs and say, here's how things work. Because it's a confusing topic, and I only feel like these issues, the ones that sit down and talk about it, are the ones that get me interested more in the logistics of it. The how does this work? Why does this work? And I really do enjoy it. Makes the action that much more interesting when you know the rules going into it. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. It's probably closer to a 7, but because it's just my cup of tea, it's the thing that I enjoy, I'm giving it that extra 0.5. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how we continue on. We only have I think 3-4 more issues of this. So we're coming to the end game, possibly with this being the beginning of our final battle. So I'm interested to see where it ends up, but I am definitely enjoying this book. The Phantom Stranger number 7, written by Dan DiDio and JMD Matteis, art by Zander Cannon and Gene Ha. So last issue, we had Terrence 13 calling Stranger saying, hey, I know where your family is. Turns out it was all ruse by the question. This issue picks up with Stranger in a church, and he is praying before Christ, and priest comes up and is just like, hey, you're wearing some weird cloak stuff. I don't know what's going on with that, but regardless, seems like you're having some issues. So I just want to have this little phrase that C.S. Lewis once said. If it seems like there isn't a plan, it's because it's all a part of the plan. If it seems like there is no center, it's because it all is center. And Stranger's just like, okay, bye. And he just walks out. And as he's leaving, he's about to get some holy water. And he looks up at a painting of Christ being betrayed. And he's like, of course. Yeah, thanks for that. And he walks out. And as he's walking out, God, in his little schnauzer form, is like, oh, what's the matter? Feeling unworthy? And he's like, why do you show up like that? He's like, because I think it's fun. I'm having fun with this. And he basically just walks and talks with Stranger for a while about, what's going on? How's things going? And Stranger's upset with him that God's forcing him along this little side detour thing he has to do instead of finding his family. And God's basically calling him out for spending time in a church. And he's like, now, don't get me wrong. I think that it is I'll just read this off here. Interesting what they've done to him, isn't it? One man teaching spontaneously, intuitively from the heart, and they turn it into a calcified global organization that chains believers with rules and regulations. And Stranger's like, I'm sorry, are you saying you don't believe in organized religion? And he's just like, question is, what do you believe in? And I'm like, okay, good way of dodging around that one. But basically he's saying, all right, look, you need to have faith in something a little bit larger than yourself, Stranger. I know that you feel betrayed and all this stuff, but there is something larger than just you, and you know that. You are aware of that. So maybe just trust the process a little bit. And God basically walks him down to this bar and says, look, the only thing I want you to do, if you want something practical to latch onto rather than just faith, go in there and deal with the guy inside. And inside is a man named Jack Ryder, who he was just fired from his reporting/hosting job by Morgan Edge in Metropolis. And he's just chewing out the bartender being like, oh, I'm Jack Ryder. Got 20 million people tune into me. Nobody can replace me. And the bartender's like, yeah, sure, whatever, cool. And the bartender is basically about to throw him out for causing too much of a ruckus. But then Stranger walks in being like, hey, I'll take care of him. 2 more beers, please. And he walks in and he's just like, hey, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do with you, but I'm just going to listen for a while about what you're complaining about. And he's like, I don't need a fan taking care of me. He's like, oh, trust me, I am not a fan of you. I have nothing to do with you, but I'm here to maybe help. And he does this little metaphor thing of like, I used to hang out with someone who spread the quote-unquote truth, and lots of people looked up to him. He was a pretty chill guy. And then all of a sudden, Jack Ryder freaks out because on TV, there's this giant monster rampaging through downtown. And the Challengers of the Unknown, which was written by DiDio in DC Universe Presents like a year ago, are showing up to take it. And Jack Ryder's like, these teens, these crappy people belong to Morgan Edge. He's using them as a rating sponge. This reality show rejects. That's just 3 blocks away. I can go report on that. I can be the face of this. I'm a do that. And Stranger's like, maybe you shouldn't run out into the middle of a monster attack. And he's like, psh, whatever, I'm getting out there. And the moment he steps outside the bar, a car nearly lands on him. And Stranger uses his abilities to just disintegrate it. And Ryder's like, you just saved me. Do you have powers? And he's like, it's kind of hard to explain. He's like, whatever, as long as you're going to keep saving me, I can rush in there and be the hero. Let's go. So at this point, Morgan Edge is like evacuating the Daily Planet because, there's a monster literally coming that way, or PGN, I should say. And the Challengers are getting up close, trying to deal with it. But then Jack Ryder shows up and he's like, hey, leave me a cameraman and I'll take care of this story. And Morgan's like, dude, you quit. You were screaming about a pay raise and then you stormed out when I wouldn't give it to you. And he's like, and now I'm back and it'll only cost you 15% more. And it's like, all right, whatever. If you want to do this, be my guest. Go on in there. So he walks into the studio and starts up his show, and he's like, hello, America and the world. The entire city of Metropolis is devastated as this monster is rampaging through. And he makes this whole thing about how it's the rich people's fault and that this is their greed incarnate or something like that. And either way, the monster literally bursts into the studio that he's reporting in, and he's like, okay, now, Stranger, I need you to protect me while I act as the hero here. And Stranger just stands there like, okay. And so Ryder does this whole thing, and he's like, now I'll stand up to the beast and blow it to pieces. This is for you, Metropolis. And then Stranger doesn't save him. And he's like, Stranger, what's happening? And he just stands there, and one of the coins around his neck, the silver pieces, falls off and disintegrates, showing that this was God's will to have Jack Ryder literally explode along with this monster. And Morgan Edge is looking up, and he's like, oh my God, Jack Ryder just died. You bastards. And he does this whole monologue of like, that man just died a hero, reporting the news. We're going to monetize the crap out of his death. And so God shows up next to Stranger, who's still in the studio, and he's like, good job, Stranger. Congratulations, you did it. And he's like, what do you mean I did? I didn't do anything. I just stood here and that dude died. And he's like, yeah, well, maybe that's part of the plan. You ever think that? And Stranger's like, no, screw that. This sucks. This is a shitty plan. I hate it. And he's like, well, I could always put that coin back around your neck if that's what you want. And he's like, can I just please go find my family? Can I just stop this stupid little side quest? And he's like, yeah, sure, go on. If that's what you want, go for it. So he goes off to Terrence 13. And he's like, Terrence, thank you for calling about my family. Sorry I'm late. I had a dog problem. Look, I know I'm not the easiest guy to deal with, but thank you for being on my side. I do feel like I can call you somewhat of a friend. And at that point, Question pops up, and he's like, oh, well, here's a good question for you. Why should he think you're a friend? You're a betrayer or whatnot. And Stranger sees Question and just freaks out. He's like, oh, you again. You son of a bitch. And so he starts throwing punches, throwing Question down on the ground. He keeps on asking questions like, do you honestly believe that you can best the Question? Is that foolishness or madness? And at that point, Stranger turns to 13, says, don't let him walk out of here. He's horrible. He's a bad person. Together, me and 13 will stop you, Question. And Question's like, oh, well, here's a question. How does it feel to be betrayed yourself? As Terrence 13 uses what I can only assume to be the Spear of Destiny to stab Stranger through the chest. And yeah, Question's just standing over him, just be like, now why don't you just shut up and die? Technically not a question, but why not? So I liked it. I love the character of God as this Schnauzer. Like, He's just fun. He's just a fun guy. I don't know. I really like that writing bit. As for the Jack Ryder stuff, it felt a little half-baked. I didn't quite get what the point of it was supposed to be. Like, he entered the story as a dick, he continued his life as a dick, and then he died as a dick. So I'm not quite sure where we were supposed to go, unless this is setting up something like the Spectre was in the Zero issue. Maybe that's going to come back. I don't know. But it didn't feel like anything in this particular one. It just felt like, as Stranger was saying, a side quest. Where it's like, can I just go? I don't want to be here. This has nothing to do with me. So, yeah, overall, I'll give this one I'll give it a flat 7. And most of it just comes down to the beginning and end bits. The middle bit was fine. It wasn't anything great. The art was very good throughout. I didn't hate any of that. But it was just kind of a mediocre story. It was only the bookends that I really enjoyed. So, yeah, I'll give it the 7 for that. Swamp Thing number 19, written by Charles Soule, art by Kano. This is the first issue of Charles Soule's run. We just finished all the Rot World stuff, and basically it all ended with Swamp Thing completely losing his human side, and now he is all plant, but like, not, sort of, kind of? It's hard to explain. So, we open up in Sudan, in a desert, and he's taken on like a cactus-like form, and he's like, you know, a lot of stuff's been happening to me recently, and now that I'm kind of all plants, I feel different in the way of interacting with plants. Like, and then he gives like the history of like he was Alec Holland, and before that he was just a plant that thought he was Alec Holland, and now he's back to being a plant that actually is Alec Holland. But either way, he arrives at this desert oasis, and he's like, you know, now that I am actually able to 100% hear the plants, like I can understand the way plants talk, all they really talk about is sunlight and dirt and water, but occasionally they say something interesting. Like, for instance, plants suddenly said, oh, there are men out in this oasis that are causing problems. So I listened to them, and I showed up. And as he's arriving, he's being shot at like crazy and trying to be stopped until he walks up on 2 men fighting, and he's like, this is wrong. What's going on here? And the guys start to run. And he just grabs one with some vines, being like, hey, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to know, why is there an oasis in the middle of this desert? And they say like, oh, Cedar came by. Seeder. He came by and he set this up. And it's been a godsend for my village because it's the closest water source and vegetation source. It's been great for us. But then this other like warlord tried to move in and steal all the resources. So we're trying to fight him off. And Swamp Thing's like, okay, yeah, I get this is important to you, but it's against nature. It shouldn't be here. It's got to go. And he just waves his hand and it all just wilts away, to which point both sides start shooting at him. And he's like, yeah, they didn't like that. Anyway, I don't care. And he just flips over all their cars and such and then disappears into the green. And as he's going through the green, he's like, this is comfortable. I'm good here. It feels like I'm simultaneously bigger than everything and yet smaller than the smallest seed, but I know that I'm acting in the green's best interest and not in mankind's, and that is something I'm kind of having to get used to because, I mean, I was a man and I still am a man. I'm just having trouble squaring my humanity with the actions I have to take in order to protect the green, because this guy, Cedar, he's coming up, he's forcing, and this isn't the first time he's done it. I've undone several things that he's been the cause of these oases and these different parts of the green that shouldn't exist. And I've had to undo them because it's not a pool that you can just add to. It's a web, and when you pull on one side of it, it unravels the other side. So I have to keep the green in balance. But either way, he needs to go to a city, specifically the Metropolis Botanical Garden, which he used to love to go to back when he was Alec Holland, but now he has to show up at night when it's all locked down because, you know, he's Swamp Thing. But either way, he goes in and he's like, I want to talk to Superman, because Superman, I know he also has to do things that are theoretically against individual interests for the betterment of mankind. And we talked before. We talked in like issue number 1. So I want to talk to him again, and hopefully I can flag him down. And as he's walking through this botanical garden, he feels some trees calling out to him because there's a colony of rats that have made a home underneath the tree roots, and they're chewing away at it, killing the trees. And so Alec just waves his hand, expands their roots, and it kills all the rats instantly. And he's like, I should feel bad because this is like the grossest thing I've ever done, but I don't, because the green is just so happy that I did it and I saved their lives. So I don't know. It's something I need to talk to Superman. I got to square this, man. And as he's walking out, he sees Scarecrow breaking in to steal a rare flower. And he grabs Scarecrow's hand and he's like, hey, that flower is known for causing significant terrors and such. I don't think you should be taking those. And Scarecrow's like, oh, it's okay. I'm a behavioral scientist. I'm a doctor. And I was using these as part of a medicine or something. And the way you're talking, it sounds like you might be a botanist. And Swamp Thing's like, does Scarecrow really think I don't recognize him as Scarecrow? Are you serious? Dude, like, clearly I know it's you. And he's like, oh, well, as a botanist, I think you can understand that I'm up for the thing. And basically Swamp Thing's just stuck there like, do I kill him? Like, it would be saving the flower, but I don't know. Killing a person just sounds extra. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And as he's thinking about it, Scarecrow snips off the vine that was restraining him. He picks up a bunch of the flowers and he's like, well, I've got my own things happening. If you read Justice League of America, that's a big hint as to what's going on there. So I'm going to leave now. Bye. And as he's walking, or as trying to walk away, Swamp Thing shows up in person now and he's like, hey, stop. And so Scarecrow sprays him with toxin. He's like, it's not going to work, man. I'm made of plants. And so Scarecrow just cycles through like 5 more toxins as basically Swamp Thing makes the straw that's in his costume grow and start to like, strangle him more or less, until finally he manages to use a toxin that is majority carbon dioxide, which means that Swamp Thing's plants absorb it and he is actually knocked out. But as he knocks out Swamp Thing, there's a rumbling in Metropolis, and the entire city is all at once overrun by giant, like, vines and plants and such. It's crawling up all the buildings, it's invading all the streets, and then we just see Superman flying it over all, looking down, and he's like, oh, this is Alec Holland's fault, isn't it? So, next issue, Superman has to wake up Alec Holland, I guess. I enjoyed it. I think it was a solid issue because I really liked this voice for Swamp Thing. The previous arc, he was still a man. He was still Alec Holland underneath the vines and the Swamp Thing. And he, was emotional. He was very like, oh, I have to protect this. I have to save life. I have to do all that. But now he's lost that and he is 100% green. But he still he was Alec Holland. He knows he was human. So that's the current story is, am I working for humanity now, or am I working for just plant life? And I like him having to decide that. Just the sheer boredom he acts like. He walks up to these people who are fighting. He's like, I don't care about you. Like, I read some of these panels in the voice of Ron Swanson, where he's just, I don't care about your problems. Tell me what I need to know. And that's it. And I love it. So yeah, it's a solid book. I am liking Charles Soule's take on it as of now. We'll see if Cedar is an interesting enough villain to keep my interest, but at the very least, I think he has a grip on this. It's not so much about the horror of it anymore, it's just about the psychology of how does someone who used to be human deal with not being human anymore. And I like that. I think it's a solid take on it. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it an 8. You know what? I'll give it an 8.5. I really do like it. I think it's a solid first entry, and I'm looking forward to the rest. And that's it. That's all the comics came out from DC Comics this April 3rd, 2013. And for those of you who listened to me in the beginning and listened to Batwing, or more importantly, Stormwatch, this has just been week 1 of WTF month. This is just the first outing. We got 3 more weeks of this. What in the hell are they going to do if they can just reset the timeline in a random-ass issue of Stormwatch and nobody seems to care? Like, how am I supposed to explain the continuity of books in this show of issue A leads to issue B leads to issue C? If issue B can just say, by the way, we're resetting the timeline. None of this happened, and yet all of it did. And I'm like, oh, thank you, book. Real helpful there. Ugh. I mean, I know that's probably the extreme. I can't imagine that all of a sudden in like All-Star Western there's going to be a new Big Bang, but you never know. So anyway, let me tell you about what books are coming out next week so we can at least mentally prepare together. So, next week, April 10th, we have the number 19 issues of Batgirl, Batman, Batman and Robin, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Deathstroke, Suicide Squad, and Demon Knights. Almost said Constantine. Constantine is at issue number 2, Ravagers, issue 11, Team 7, issue 7, and Threshold number 4. I got to have a better way to read that off when all the numbers are different like that, because it's only going to get worse as the show progresses. But that's a problem for next week's David. This week's David, it just wants to tell you about all the ways that you can connect on social media. We have a Twitter and a Discord and a Reddit and a Patreon for you high rollers. Only the most elite get in there, what with their having to spend $1 and all. But anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, and consuming my breakdown in whatever form you see fit. Be sure to tune in next week. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.